The market was loud with voices, the smell of strange spices and hot metal in the air. Merchants shouted prices for goods from across the stars. People pushed through the dusty streets, carrying bags of food, tools, and weapons. Yet in one corner, beneath the heavy shadow of a rusted iron cage, there was silence. The silence did not come from emptiness. It came from her. She stood inside the cage, her skin a deep green that shimmered under the sunlight filtering through the broken roof. Her hair was pure white, falling in waves to her waist. She wore a torn dress, stitched in places, ripped in. Others, yet her stance was proud. Her eyes, sharp, bright, and filled with defiance, met anyone who dared look too long. The merchants called her untamable, a word meant to warn buyers. But in truth, it was meant to make them afraid. No. One bid on her. The auctioneer's voice grew tired from calling out her lot number. He shouted about her strength, her rare beauty, and her strange skills in battle. But the crowd avoided her cage like a shadow in the desert. Some whispered that she had attacked her last owner. Others claimed she had once killed 3 men with her bare hands. Whether those stories were true or not, her eyes told everyone she was dangerous. The auction was almost over when he arrived, the human. He walked into the market. With calm steps, his boots kicking up dust. His armor was worn but polished, the black plates marked with faint scars from battles past. A short rifle hung across his back, and a long knife rested on his hip. He didn't shout, didn't push through the crowd. Instead, people moved out of his way without him asking. His gaze scanned the market like he had been here before, though. No one had seen him in this part of the city. He stopped at a fruit stall, exchanged a few coins for something red and round, and took a bite. Only then did he turn toward the cages. The auctioneer was preparing to close the sale for the day when the human's voice cut through the air. How much for her? Every head turned. The merchants froze. The alien guards near the cage stiffened, their hands resting on the hilts of their weapons. The green-skinned woman's eyes narrowed, her hands tightening on the bars. The auctioneer laughed nervously. "Sir, she's not recommended. A wild one this, tried to bite a trader last week. She, how much?" The human asked again, his voice calm but firm. The auctioneer's lips pressed into a thin line. He named a price higher than anything else sold that day, hoping it would scare him off. The human didn't blink. He reached into a pouch at his belt, counted out the exact amount in heavy coins, and placed them on the table. The crowd murmured, some in disbelief, others in fear. The guards unlocked the cage, but not without caution. One guard whispered to the human, "She won't obey you. She's broken many before." The human didn't answer. He simply stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers through the bars. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the door creaked open, and she stepped out. She didn't look at the guards or the auctioneer. She only looked at him. Her chains clinked with every step, the heavy metal around her wrists and ankles scraping against the stone floor. She stopped just a breath away from him, her gaze steady. "Why?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. He shrugged. "Because no one else would." For the first time that day, her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. It wasn't warm, it wasn't friendly, but it was something. The guards exchanged uneasy looks as the human took the chain from the auctioneer's hand. They walked together through the market, the crowd parting around them. Some spat in the dirt, others shook their heads. A few looked away, pretending not to see. She walked without stumbling, her head high, her eyes scanning every shadow. The human didn't pull the chain tight. He didn't need to. She followed, not because she was forced, but because she was curious. At the edge of the market, the noise faded. The air grew cooler, the streets wider. He led her to a small ship docked in a quiet hangar. It was old, patched with metal plates of different colors, but it looked fast. The human stopped at the ramp and turned to her. "You have a choice," he said. "You can stay here, go wherever you want, or you can come with me." She tilted her head. "And if I come with you?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'll have work, food, and no chains." Her eyes searched his face for lies. She found none. With a slow, deliberate movement, she let the chains fall from her wrists. They hit the ground with a sound that echoed in the empty hangar. She stepped past him and into the ship. The human watched her disappear inside. He knew she wasn't tamed. He knew she might turn on him one day. But for now, she had chosen to follow. And in this galaxy, that was enough. Asterisk inside the ship, the air smelled of metal, oil, and faint spice from old cargo. The lights along the ceiling flickered before steadying, revealing a narrow hallway lined with storage crates. The woman walked slowly, her bare feet silent on the floor. She touched the wall as she passed, feeling the small vibrations from the ship's engines resting in standby mode. The human followed behind her, carrying a small case from his belt. He watched her carefully, not with suspicion, but as if studying a storm cloud and deciding where it might break. She stopped near a bench fixed against the wall and sat down, her white hair falling forward like a curtain. "What's your name?" he asked. She glanced up. "Why?" "Because I don't like calling people by nothing," he said simply. She was quiet for a moment, as if measuring whether a name could be a weapon in the wrong hands. "Liora," she said at last. He nodded. "Jace." The silence between them felt heavy but not hostile. Jace opened the case, pulling out a small scanner and a metal band. He knelt in front of her, holding it where she could see. "It's a translator. You'll understand any language spoken near you." Leora's eyes narrowed. "And you'll understand me?" "Every word." She allowed him to attach the band to her wrist. The device hummed softly, and her posture shifted. She tested it by speaking in her own tongue, a flowing, sharp-edged language. "You're either a fool, or you're not afraid of me," she said. "Both can be true," Jace replied. He stood and walked toward the cockpit, gesturing for her to follow. She hesitated, then rose and moved after him. The cockpit was small, with 2 seats and a wide view of the hangar. Beyond the glass, the dusty city was just beginning to glow under the orange light of a lowering sun. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Out of here," Jay said, starting the ship's engines. The hum grew louder, steady and confident. "Somewhere you're not in a cage." Her eyes stayed on him as the ship lifted from the ground, the hangar shrinking below. The city spread out beneath them, crowded streets, flickering lights, twisting alleys. As the sky turned dark, stars broke through the haze one by one. Liora sat back in her seat, her gaze shifting from the view to Jace. "You didn't buy me just to free me. What do you want?" He kept his hands on the controls. "A crew. 1 I can trust." She gave a sharp laugh. "You think you can trust me?" "No," he said. "Not yet. But I think you have more reason to stay alive than to kill me." She considered his words, the glow from the console painting her face in soft blue light. "And if you're wrong? Then I'll deal with it when it happens." Hours later, the ship moved through the black stretch of space, far from the planet's pull. Jace set the autopilot and stood. "There's food in the galley. Left side of the hall. Water's in the storage unit above." She didn't move right away, but her eyes followed him as he left the cockpit. Hunger eventually pushed her to find the galley, a small space with a table bolted to the floor and a food dispenser mounted on the wall. She pressed a button and a steaming plate slid out, the smell strange but not unpleasant. As she ate, her eyes wandered over the room. Every surface was clean but worn, like it had been cared for over years of travel. A small plant in a cracked pot sat in the corner, its leaves curling slightly toward the ceiling light. When Jace returned, he carried 2 steaming cups. He set one in front of her. "It's not poison," he said. She drank, the warmth sliding down her throat. "Where did you learn my language?" she asked. "The translator helps, but I've been in this galaxy long enough to pick up pieces of many tongues." Her gaze was steady on him. "Why risk your credits for someone like me? You could have bought anything else." He leaned back in his chair. "Because cages are made for the wrong people most of the time." The quiet that followed was different from before, less sharp, more like a thread of understanding. That night, Liora didn't sleep much. She walked the narrow halls of the ship, her fingers brushing over the walls, listening to the steady heartbeat of the engines. She paused at the cockpit and looked out at the sea of stars. Somewhere out there, the people who had caged her would hear she was gone. She wondered if they would come for her. Behind her, Jace's voice was calm. "If you're going to run, do it now. Once we're further out, you'll have fewer choices." She didn't turn around. "And if I stay?" He stepped forward, standing beside her to look at the stars. "Then we'll see where this goes." She studied him for a long moment, then looked back at the stars. "I'll stay, for now." Neither spoke again for the rest of the night. But in that quiet, something small shifted, like the first stone moving before an avalanche. The next day began with the soft hum of the ship's engines, and the faint rattle of tools from the maintenance bay. Liora followed the sound, curious. She found Jace crouched beside an open panel, his sleeves rolled up, a streak of grease across his forearm. He was tightening bolts with a steady hand, his eyes focused. She leaned against the doorway. "You fix everything yourself?" He didn't look up. "When you live out here, you learn to. Waiting for help usually means you're already dead." She studied the tools laid neatly beside him. Each was clean and placed in a perfect line. It told her more about him than his words. He was careful, disciplined, and maybe a little stubborn. "Where are we going?" she asked. Jace set the wrench down and wiped his hands on a cloth. "There's a refueling station 3 days from here. After that, I have a job on Varus Prime." She tilted her head. "What kind of job? Delivery?" "Something legal this time." The way he said "this time" made her raise a brow. "And you want me to help?" "I want to see if you can," he replied, standing and closing the panel. Later, in the galley, Jace placed a small device on the table between them. It was round, no bigger than his palm, with a dull silver surface. "This is a cum beacon," he explained. "It can call for help or send a warning. I'm giving it to you." She looked at it, then at him. "Why would you trust me with this?" "Because if you wanted to kill me, you already had chances," he said. "This will make our work easier." Liora picked up the device, turning it over in her hand. She wasn't sure if it was a gift or a test. Maybe both. By the second day, the routine of the ship began to feel less like a cage and more like a strange kind of freedom. She walked the halls without chains, explored storage rooms without being told to stop, and sat in the cockpit beside Jace as he steered through the dark stretch of space. But freedom came with a shadow. That night, as Jace checked the navigation logs, an alert flashed across the console. "Ship approaching," he said, his tone calm but firm. Liora leaned forward. "How far?" "Too close for comfort," he replied, tapping the screen. The scanner showed a small vessel following at high speed. Her eyes narrowed. "They're after me." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Jace adjusted the controls, pushing the engines harder. The hum turned into a roar, and the stars outside stretched into thin lines. The other ship didn't fall back. Minutes passed in. Tense silence. Leora's fingers gripped the edge of her seat, but her face stayed composed. Jace glanced at her. "You're not afraid?" "I've been hunted before," she said. When the pursuing ship drew closer, its outline became clearer. On the scanner, it was sharp-edged, fast and armed. Jace's hand hovered over the weapon controls. "They're locking on." Without waiting for his order, Liora moved to the side panel and opened a compartment. She pulled out a long curved blade alien made, the metal dark and ridged with strange markings. She checked its balance in her hand like she had done it 1,000 times. "You're bringing a knife to a ship fight?" Jace asked. She gave a small smile. "Only if they board." The cum unit crackled to life. A harsh voice filled the cockpit. "Hand over the girl. We'll let you live." Jace didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the controls, his mind calculating. Liora reached over and switched the cum off. "Don't talk to them," she said quietly. "They'll take it as weakness." The pursuing ship fired first. The blast shook their vessel, alarms flashing red across the console. Jace swore under his breath, rolling the ship into a sharp dive. The enemy ship followed, matching every move. In the middle of the chaos, Liora spoke. Calmly, "If they catch us, they'll kill you." "Then they won't catch us," Jace replied. He switched off the running lights, cutting their signature in half. The ship dropped into the shadow of a drift-in asteroid field, rocks spinning slowly in the darkness. The enemy vessel hesitated. Scanning the field, Jace maneuvered carefully, using the asteroids for cover. Liora watched the scanner, her sharp eyes following every flicker of movement. When the enemy ship finally moved to flank them, Jace fired a burst from the forward cannons. The shot struck one of the larger asteroids, sending debris flying. The pursuing ship took a hit to its side and spun away. In the silence that followed, both of them stayed still, listening to the hum of the engines and the fading echo of the battle. "They'll be back," Liora said at last. Jace nodded. "Then, we'll be ready." For the first time since leaving the planet, she looked at him not as the man who bought her, but as someone she might actually stand beside in a fight. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the beginning of something close. Asterisk. The refueling station floated in the darkness like a small city of metal and light. Long docking arms reached out toward incoming ships, and glowing signs flickered with alien symbols. As Jace guided the vessel into a docking bay, the low hiss of airlock sealing filled the cockpit. Liora stood behind him, her arms crossed. "You trust this place?" "I don't trust any place," Jace said, shutting down the engines. "But we need fuel and supplies." The docking hatch opened with a hiss. Warm, recycled air rushed inside, carrying the smell of metal, cooking oil, and too many bodies in one place. They stepped onto the station floor, blending into the stream of travelers, traders in heavy coats, miners covered in dust, and mercenaries. With weapons at their hips, Liora kept close, but her eyes moved constantly, scanning faces, exits, and corners. "They might be here," she murmured. He didn't need to ask who she meant. He could feel the tension in her steps. "If they are, we leave fast." They made their way to a small supply shop. The shelves were lined with fuel cells, ration packs, water filters, and stacks of mechanical parts. Jace began gathering what they needed while Liora drifted toward the back of the store. A small child, no older than 7, stared at her from behind a stack of crates. His skin was the same, green as hers, though lighter, and his eyes widened when she looked at him. Slowly he stepped forward. "Are you from the old colonies?" Her breath caught for a moment. "Yes," she said softly. Before she could say more, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Step away from her." 2 men stood in the doorway. They wore the markings of the same faction that had once owned her. Their eyes locked on her with a mixture of anger and greed. One of them smiled coldly. "Told you she was here." Jace dropped the fuel cell into his basket and moved between them and Liora. "Keep walking," he said evenly. The first man laughed. "You think you can keep her? She's ours, always was." "Not anymore," Jace replied. The second man's hand went to his weapon, but Liora moved faster. She grabbed a metal rod from the shelf and swung it with enough force to knock the weapon from his grip. The crack of impact echoed through the store. The first man lunged, but Jace stepped in, driving his elbow into the man's ribs. He doubled over, gasping for air. The shopkeeper shouted for them to take the fight outside, but the men were already stumbling toward the door. One glared back at Liora. "This isn't over." When they were gone, Jace turned to her. "You knew them?" Her jaw tightened. "They knew me." "That's enough." They left the shop quickly, Jace carrying the supplies while Liora scanned the crowd. The noise of the station seemed louder now, the press of people heavier. They reached the ship and loaded the supplies without a word. Inside the cockpit, Jace checked the docking fees while Liora stood by the window, staring at the station's lights. "They won't stop," she said finally. "I know," Jace replied. "So we make sure they can't catch us." She turned to him. "Why? You could drop me anywhere and they'd leave you alone." He met her eyes. "Because leaving you to them would make me no better than they are." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she sat down in the co-pilot's seat and buckled in. "Then you'd better be ready to fight." When they undocked, the station's lights fell away behind them. The stars stretched once more as the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. Later, as the hum of the engines filled the corridors, Liora found herself in the storage room, looking through one of the sealed crates. Inside were weapons, carefully maintained blasters, knives, and a set of black armor. She touched the armor's surface, feeling the faint scratches of past battles. Jace appeared in the doorway. "That was mine a long time ago," he said. She glanced at him. "You were a soldier." "Not for anyone I'm proud of," he replied. "But I learned things that might keep us alive." She looked back at the armor, then at him. "Then teach me." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Tomorrow." That night, Liora lay in her small cabin, staring at the ceiling. The faces of the men from the station lingered in her mind. They were a reminder that her past wasn't gone, it was chasing her. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running alone. The next morning, the cargo bay became their training ground. The floor was wide and empty, with only a few crates pushed against the walls. Jace stood at one end, wearing light armor and holding 2 practice sticks. He tossed one to Liora. She caught it without looking, twirling it in her hand. "You're sure you want to do this?" "I want to see what you can do," Jace replied. They began slowly, moving in circles, each watching the other's stance. Jace struck first, aiming for her shoulder. She blocked with a sharp snap of her wrist, then countered with a low strike toward his ribs. He dodged, grinning slightly. "You've fought before," he said. "I've survived before," she corrected. The pace quickened. Wooden strikes cracked against each other, the sound echoing through the bay. Liora's movements were fast and precise, but Jace was heavier and stronger. When he pressed forward, she used speed to slip out of reach, striking from the side. After 20 minutes, they both stepped back, breathing hard. Sweat ran down the side of Liora's face, but her eyes were bright. "You're quick," Jace said, "but you're holding back." She tilted her head. "You don't want to see me when I'm not." He raised a brow. "Maybe I do." The second round was different. Liora's strikes came faster, sharper, with a rhythm that felt almost like a dance. She switched from defense to attack in an instant, her body moving with dangerous grace. Jace had to work harder now, blocking and sidestepping to keep up. A final blow knocked his stick from his hand. It clattered to the floor, and she stopped with her weapon just inches from his chest. "You win," he said, breathing heavily. She lowered the stick. "You're not bad for a human," she teased. Jace chuckled, retrieving his weapon. "You've got skill, but skill alone won't keep you alive out here. You'll need to fight against blasters, explosives, and people who don't play fair." "Then teach me those too," she said. The rest of the day was spent learning to handle small firearms. Jace showed her how to load, aim, and fire without wasting a shot. Her accuracy was good, but she admitted she preferred the feel of a blade. Blades "Don't run out of power," she explained that as they worked. Jace noticed something in her eyes when she held a weapon, a cold focus, the kind that came from years of being hunted. It wasn't just skill. It was survival carved into her bones. That night, over a meal in the galley, Liora spoke without looking at him. "The men from the station. They were part of a clan called the Volrek. They took me from my home when I was young. Sold me more. Then once, I escaped 3 years ago, but they never stopped chasing me." Jace leaned back in his chair. "And if they catch you, they won't take me alive." Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. The following day, the ships. Sensors picked up another vessel trailing them at long range. It didn't close in, but it stayed on their path. "They're watching us," Jace said. Staring at the screen, Liora's hand tightened on the edge of the console. "It's them." Jace adjusted their course, heading toward a small moon listed on the star charts as uninhabited. "We'll make a stop there. See if we can lose them." Hours later, they landed on the moon's rocky surface. The air was thin but breathable, and the horizon stretched out in shades of gray and silver. The ground crunched under their boots as they walked away from the ship. "This place is dead," Liora said, scanning the empty terrain. "That's why it's good," Jace replied. "No witnesses. No surprises." But there was a surprise. As they climbed a low ridge, they saw fresh tracks in the dust boot prints that didn't belong to either of them. Jace crouched, studying them. "We're not alone." Before he could say more, a shot rang out, picking up dust near his feet. They dove behind a rock, weapons drawn. 3 figures emerged from the ridge ahead, armed and moving fast. Liora's eyes went cold. "Volrek," she said that the fight was quick and brutal. Jace took down one with a clean shot to the leg, while Liora moved like a shadow, striking the second in the throat with the hilt of her blade. The third tried to retreat, but Jace's voice stopped him. "Tell your clan," he said, leveling his weapon. "If they keep following, they won't get her back in one piece." The man scrambled away, limping. Liora stood beside Jace, her breathing steady despite the fight. "You know that won't stop them," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but it might make them think twice." They returned to the ship without another word, the silence between them no longer heavy with mistrust. It was filled with the weight of something else, an understanding that the road ahead was going to be harder than either of them had thought. The days after the moon skirmish were quiet, but neither Jace nor Liora believed the silence meant safety. The Volrek clan had tasted their failure, and that only meant they would return in greater numbers that one evening. As the ship glided between 2 distant star systems, the sensors picked up multiple incoming signatures. Too many, Jace's eyes scanned. The readings, 5 ships, all armed. Liora stepped into the cockpit, her jaw tightening. "They're done chasing. They're here to take me." Jace turned to her. "Then we don't run this time." He guided the ship toward an asteroid belt, a maze of spinning rocks and glowing fragments. It was dangerous, but it gave them cover. The Volrek ships followed, their red running lights glowing like hunting eyes in the dark. "Arm the cannons," Jace said, flipping switches. "If we're going down, we're not going quietly." Liora strapped into the co-pilot's seat, her hands moving over the controls without hesitation. The targeting system came alive, glowing red circles locking. "Onto the enemy ships," she exhaled slowly. "Let's make them remember today." The battle began in a flash of light and steel. Jace weaved the ship between asteroids, firing bursts from the cannons that forced the Volrek to split their formation. Liora tracked one on the left flank and sent a direct hit to its engines. The vessel spun out, colliding with a drifting rock. 2 more came in from behind. The ship jolted under enemy fire, alarms screaming. Jace gritted his teeth, forcing the vessel through a narrow gap that scraped the paint from both sides. Liora swung the turret toward their attackers and fired in quick succession. One ship exploded in a spray of metal, but the other kept coming. "They're not breaking off," she said. "They think numbers will save them." Jace replied. The remaining ships regrouped, closing in from all sides. One broadcasted over the com, the voice deep and smug. "Surrender her, human. You'll walk away alive." Liora's eyes met Jace's. "Don't answer." Instead, Jace cut the transmission and pushed the engines to maximum. The sudden speed slammed them both back in their seats. He steered the ship toward the largest asteroid in sight, a massive jagged shape that blocked the light of the distant sun. "What are you doing?" Liora asked. "Ending this," he said. They shot toward the asteroid, enemy ships in pursuit. At the last moment, Jace dove into a crater on its surface, the walls closing in around them. The Volrek followed, their ships funneling in. Liora's hands flew over the console. "We've got one shot. Collapse the entrance after they follow." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Can you time it?" "Yes," she said. "But I'll need both our guns firing." The plan unfolded in seconds. They sped through the crater tunnel, firing at the rock walls until cracks began to form. As the last of the Volrek ships entered, behind them, Liora hit the detonator. The explosion shook the entire asteroid, sending a rain of boulders crashing down to seal the passage. When the dust cleared, only their ship remained in the tunnel. The scanner showed nothing outside, no ships, no pursuit. They floated in the shadow of the asteroid for a long moment, the silence pressing in. Jace finally leaned back, letting out a breath. "That's the last of them, for now." Liora sat still, her hands resting on the console. "You could have handed me over. You would have lived." Jace glanced at her. "That's not the kind of man I am." Her eyes softened not in weakness, but in recognition. "Then I owe you more than my life." He shook his head. "You owe me nothing, just don't waste the freedom you've got now." She looked at the stars through the viewport, their light sharp and endless. For years, her life had been about running, surviving, and waiting for the next chain to fall around her wrists. But now, sitting in this battered ship beside the human who had bought her only to give her a choice, something shifted deep inside. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Jac smiled faintly. "Anywhere we want." They emerged from the asteroid's shadow, the endless black of space stretching before them. The stars didn't feel so far away anymore. And as the ship's engines roared back to life, Liora realized she was no longer a prisoner, not to the Volrek, not to her past, and not even to her own fear. For the first time in years, she was free. And this time, she wasn't going to run from it.